I used to believe some lies were told to protect love. Now, I know some are told to protect egos. It's funny, sitting here in my glass-walled office, sipping overpriced coffee, watching the morning traffic curl through downtown Seattle, I still hear my husband's voice in my head. Mads, you know I'd help if I could. I'm broke, baby. Every cent is for my surgery. That was 2 years ago. Today, the woman he pitted runs a company worth more than the house we once fought over. My phone buzzes against the mahogany desk. The name flashing on the screen makes my stomach tighten. Ethan Reed. I stare at it for a full 5 seconds, the steam from my coffee blurring the reflection of my face in the glass. He hasn't called in months. Not since the divorce papers were finalized, not since the truth came out about where that $150,000 really went. I let it ring once more, twice, then answer. His voice trembles, polite at first. Hey, Madison. I didn't know who else to call. The city outside is loud, horns blaring, sunlight glinting off metal. Inside, it's silent, the kind of silence that comes right before you decide whether to reopen a wound or finally let it scar. I lean back, tracing a fingertip over the edge of my coffee cup, and say quietly, "Funny. I didn't think you'd ever call the woman you couldn't afford to help." And just like that, the past starts knocking again. I still remember the night Ethan told me he was broke. We were in the kitchen of our tiny apartment, the one that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and burnt toast. I'd just finished showing him a pitch deck I'd spent weeks preparing. It wasn't anything huge, just a small business idea, handmade eco-friendly candles I'd been selling online that were starting to take off. I needed $20,000 to expand, packaging, marketing, maybe a small workspace. Ethan sat there, scrolling his phone, barely looking up. When he finally did, he gave me this tired, sympathetic look. "Madison, honey, I wish I could help," he said, setting the phone down like he was delivering bad news from a doctor. "But I'm completely tapped out. Between rent, bills, and saving for my knee surgery, there's nothing left." I remember my chest tightening. I'd watched him deposit his bonuses, brag about new clients, order expensive whiskey online. But I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe the man I married wouldn't lie about something so serious. So I smiled, that small, brittle kind of smile that hides humiliation, and said, "Of course, I understand. Your health comes first." Later that week, I found the receipt. It was folded in his jacket pocket, crumpled, and still warm from his body heat. A jewelry store in Portland. $12,600. Not for me. I hadn't worn jewelry since our wedding day. My hands shook so badly, I dropped the paper twice. The truth hit like cold water. The $150,000 for his surgery was never for him. He'd been spending it, quietly, lavishly, while watching me scrape together pennies to chase my dream. That night, I didn't scream or cry. I just packed a bag. I remember grabbing my grandmother's old silver locket from the dresser, the one she gave me before she passed. Inside, there was a tiny folded note in her handwriting. "Don't beg love to stay. Build something it can't destroy." I slipped it around my neck, zipped my bag, and walked out into the rain. The streetlights reflected in the puddles like tiny broken promises. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't keep shrinking myself for a man who thought my ambition was an inconvenience. That night, Madison Reed disappeared. And the woman who would replace her, she hadn't been born yet. The first few months after I left Ethan felt like free-falling through fog. I rented a shoebox studio in Tacoma, a cracked ceiling, mismatched tiles, and a bed that creaked every time I breathed. But it was mine. No judgment, no lies, no man reminding me what I owed him. By day, I worked at a small cafe, pouring coffee and pretending the smell of roasted beans could fill the emptiness inside me. By night, I went back to what I loved, candles. The soft flicker, the scents that told stories. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind every time I poured wax into a mold. Build something love can't destroy. I started posting my creations on Etsy. My first sale was a $14 lavender candle to a woman in Michigan. It wasn't much, but it felt like oxygen. I remember pressing my palms together and whispering, "Thank you," as if that one order proved the universe hadn't given up on me yet. A few weeks later, I met Carla Donovan, the owner of the cafe. She was in her 50s, sharp as glass, and wore red lipstick like armor. She caught me sketching candle labels on a napkin during my break and said, "You've got a good eye, Reed. Ever think of turning that into something real?" I told her I wanted to, but that I didn't have the money, experience, or confidence.
She smirked.
"None of us do when we start," she said, tossing me her business card. "Come to the women's business co-op I run on Thursdays. Learn to swim before you drown in excuses." That Thursday changed everything. I walked into a room full of women, single mothers, divorcees, retirees, all building something from nothing. They shared contacts, suppliers, tips, failures. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. Carla became my mentor. She taught me about margins, branding, supply chains. But more than that, she taught me how to own my story. "Men like your ex feed on silence," she said once. "Don't hide your scars. Polish them until they shine."
So I did.
I worked until my hands ached, learned photography to shoot my own ads, and taught myself social media marketing through YouTube tutorials. I sold candles out of my kitchen, shipped boxes on my lunch breaks, and slept 4 hours a night. A year later, my tiny brand, Soul Light Candles, got featured in a lifestyle blog. Orders exploded overnight. My studio filled with boxes, wax, labels, and hope. When the first big check cleared, I stared at the balance and cried. Not from greed, from relief. I had done it. Alone. I didn't post about it. I didn't brag. I still let Ethan believe I was scraping by. When he texted, "Hope you're doing okay," I'd just reply, "Trying my best." He had no idea that the woman he left broken was now the CEO of a company lighting homes across the country. And I liked it that way. My silence was my revenge and my peace. When Ethan called that morning, I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But curiosity is a tricky thing. It doesn't fade, it lingers. So, after a pause that felt like a lifetime, I told him he could come by my office. Not my home. My office. 2 hours later, I heard the soft chime of the lobby door and the unmistakable rhythm of his footsteps. Funny how even after years apart, I still recognized the sound of his nervous pacing. When he walked in, his jaw literally dropped. He stood there, staring up at the wall-sized logo behind my desk, Soul Light, written in soft gold lettering across the frosted glass. Beneath it, smaller letters read, Founder and CEO, Madison Reed. The office smelled faintly of sandalwood and bergamot, the signature scent of my candle line. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, dancing across white marble floors and shelves lined with awards, framed magazine features, and small touches of who I'd become. He blinked, looking lost. This is yours?" he stammered, his voice thin, like he couldn't quite believe the air he was breathing. I leaned back in my chair, crossing one leg over the other. "Yes, Ethan. Mine." I gestured lightly. "Unless you think I borrowed it all for the day." He gave a weak laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. The same nervous tick he used when caught in a lie. "Wow, you've done well. I mean, I always knew you had potential." I tilted my head. "Did you? I don't remember that version of you." He sighed, sliding his hands into his pockets. "Look, I didn't come here to fight. I need help, Madison. My surgery fund's gone, my business collapsed, and—" I cut him off gently, my voice calm but sharp enough to slice through the tension. "The surgery fund? You mean the one you already spent?" He froze, eyes darting away. "That was complicated. Things got out of control. I made some bad investments. I shouldn't have. Lied." I finished for him. Silence. The kind that weighs down a room until even breathing feels like confession. He looked up, guilt clouding his face. "I know I hurt you. I was stupid, selfish. I didn't think you'd actually leave." I smiled, soft and distant. "That's because you didn't think I could stand on my own." I stood and walked toward the window, letting him take in the city skyline. My skyline now. "You said you were broke, Ethan. That you couldn't afford to help me.
But the truth is, you didn't want to.
You didn't want me to succeed without needing you." He flinched, like every word was a slap he'd been waiting years to receive. Finally, he muttered, "So what now? You're rich, I'm broke. You win." I turned back, meeting his eyes, not with cruelty, but with clarity. "There's no winning in betrayal, Ethan. There's just surviving it. I didn't build this to get even with you. I built it because you forced me to find out who I really was." He looked around one last time, as if searching for proof that this wasn't real, that the girl he left crying on a rainy sidewalk hadn't turned into a woman who could buy and sell everything he once owned. But it was real. Every inch of it. I walked past him, placed a candle on the desk, our bestseller, called Closure. I lit it slowly, the flame catching with a soft flick. The scent filled the room, warm vanilla and smoke. "Take this," I said quietly. "It burns for exactly 2 hours. Long enough to think about what you destroyed and what I built."
He didn't speak.
He just nodded, eyes glistening, and walked out the door. And as the door closed behind him, I realized the sound of his leaving didn't hurt anymore. It sounded like peace. The next morning, Ethan showed up again. No call this time, just a knock on the frosted glass door. When I looked up from my desk, he was standing there, holding the candle I'd given him. It was burned down halfway. "I didn't know where else to go," he said, voice raw. "I sat up all night thinking about what you said. You were right.
I didn't want you to succeed without me.
I was afraid you would, and then you did." There was no smugness left in him, just the hollow tone of a man who finally realized he'd been the villain in someone else's story. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." He did, shoulders slumped, looking smaller than I remembered. I studied him for a long moment, not to wound him, but to understand why I ever gave so much power to someone who gave so little back. Finally, I said, "You said you need help. What exactly are you asking for?" He swallowed hard. "Money. Not a handout alone. My medical bills. I really do need surgery this time. And I can't qualify for anything." The old Madison, the one who once apologized for taking up space, would have said yes instantly. But the woman sitting here now wasn't desperate for approval. I leaned forward, folding my hands. "I'll help you," I said slowly, watching his eyes flicker with relief, "but on one condition." "Anything," he said quickly. "You'll sign over your share of the business you started after we divorced. The one you bragged about? The one you used our savings to fund." He blinked, confused. "That business failed." "I know," I interrupted, "but the license, the name, the inventory, I can repurpose it. You give it to me, and I'll cover your surgery." He hesitated. "Why does that matter to you?" I gave a small, knowing smile. "Because I'm turning it into a scholarship fund for women trying to rebuild their lives after betrayal. Seems fitting, don't you think?" He stared at me, eyes watering, not from anger this time, but from shame. "You do that? Even after everything I did?" "I'm not doing it for you, Ethan," I said softly. "I'm doing it for the woman I was when you lied to me. She deserved better, and this is how I give it to her." He nodded slowly, tears threatening to spill. "Okay, you'll have everything signed by tomorrow." I stood and offered my hand. He took it, his palm trembling. "Thank you," he whispered. I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Don't thank me. Thank the woman you taught to stop needing your permission to rise." He left quietly. I watched him through the glass, shoulders hunched, candle clutched to his chest like it was all he had left. For the first time, I didn't feel bitterness or anger. Just closure, the kind that doesn't come from revenge, but from understanding that growth is the best repayment. He had taken from me once. Now, unknowingly, he was helping me give back. And that was the real power shift. 3 months later, Ethan's surgery was complete. He sent a short email, no flattery, no excuses. "Just thank you for keeping your word. I won't waste this chance." I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need to anymore. Some stories don't need epilogues. Some just need peace. The Women's Fund, the one I'd built from the ashes of his failed business, took off faster than I imagined. We called it the Second Light Foundation. It started small, 3 scholarships for women escaping toxic relationships, trying to rebuild their dreams from scratch. Within months, we had dozens of applicants, women with voices trembling on the edge of hope. Every time I read their stories, I saw fragments of myself. The girl who packed a single bag, the one who whispered goodbye to her old life under streetlights and rain. One evening, after a long day of reviewing applications, I found myself sitting on the office couch, tracing the silver locket around my neck. It had been with me through everything, through tears, through nights of fear, through triumphs I never thought I'd live to see. I opened it again, the tiny note still folded neatly inside. Don't beg love to stay. Build something it can't destroy. For the first time, I truly understood what my grandmother meant. Love, the real kind, doesn't fear strength. It celebrates it. And what Ethan gave me unknowingly was the chance to love myself enough to stop settling for less. I walked over to the window, the city glowing below like a constellation of second chances. My reflection met my gaze, calm, certain, untouchable. Behind me, one of my team members knocked softly and poked her head in. "We just got our 100th order for the closure candle line," she said, smiling. "Should we restock?" I smiled back.
Yes.
"Let's keep the light burning." When she left, I stood there alone for a moment, breathing in the faint scent of wax and vanilla that always lingered here. It didn't smell like pain anymore. It smelled like purpose. I placed the locket back against my chest, closed my eyes, and whispered, not to Ethan, not to anyone else, but to the woman who had once been afraid of being alone.
You made it, Mads.
You built something love couldn't destroy. I turned off the lights, locked the office door, and stepped into the night. Stronger, softer, and finally free. He lied to keep me small. But in losing me, he taught me the truth. I was never the one who was broke.